Hey folks, David Stewart here. I am back with a good friend, Brian Niemeier, and we're going to talk a little bit today about neo-patronage and what that means and what Brian is doing with it, and maybe me and maybe some of you, depending on where we want to go with it, and some of the things that are making this condition preferable, I think, for artists, as well as making this condition necessary for artists. How are you doing, Brian?
Doing phenomenal. How are you, David?
I'm doing pretty good. I finished a garage remodel, which occupied a lot of my time. I want to, before I go further, Brian's Patreon and his Subscribe Star are linked. Of course, my Subscribe Star is in the show notes. I will be, I guess, taking a more active role in that, as well as Patreon, which I will probably link to Patreon a little bit later, even though I'm not done editing like every single tier, but just so that people can have that. In the meantime, I do want to link my music only channel because I started a music only channel, and let me see if I can find it real quick, because I didn't make a bookmark of my channel. Very smart of me, right?
Genius.
I can't switch accounts right now. Anyway, I'll link that a little bit later in the program as we go here. All right, here we is. I can grab it right here. In fact, I could have played some music. Here's some of the music. All right, so a lot of ambient stuff, and you could check that out. Oh my gosh, that was such an easy. Sometimes you laugh. You're like, oh yeah, the URL is not a bunch of random letters now. It's just youtube.com/@ZoolOnline. And then you can listen to the music. All right, yeah, I focused a lot on that. My first big milestone for that's 100 subscribers and 30 videos. Most of it is live music. It's live improv of the stuff that I've done on my albums. My attempt to kind of translate it into a live format, which, you know, there's going to be some mistakes because it's completely live, but because it's, live, most people kind of forgive that, just like how there's a couple clams on every jazz song, you know what I mean? But that's part of the process of making jazz music. When you make something on the spot, you give up that idea of perfection, and instead you go for what expresses the moment best. Anyway, so I want to link that, and I want to promote that to people. If you enjoy music while you write, things that are unobtrusive without vocals, then that channel will have a lot of that. There's both pure like ambient guitar stuff like Andy Othling or Chords of Orion or some of the other YouTube guys that do that. And there's also ambient rock if you like drums. So there's a whole set of drum stuff. Right now, most of the drums are pre-programmed. Eventually, I'll do all the programming of the drums live, but I have to kind of restrict myself. This is a tip for artists, is like, keep it simple, restrict what you do, and try to make that good before you expand on it. Don't try to do everything at once. It rarely turns out well.
Yep. Ain't that the truth?
All right.
As I've had to learn.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about neo-patronage and what your idea of neo-patronage is, as well as how we can look at it and express it, as well as, I guess, the blip that is the 20th century in terms of the arts. Because if you step into history, an art history or music history, you get a very different picture of how artists lived and worked in the past versus how they lived and worked in the 20th century, in what I call the corporate period.
Yes, I'm familiar with that, as well as your corporate IP death cycle, brilliant insights. And yeah, I would love to talk about just the historic anomaly of the 20th century in the arts. And boy, I think we're going to look back on the 20th century and the early 21st as the psyop age, because it was the first time that mass media got ubiquitous and powerful enough to just pull the wool over everyone's eyes, like kind of disproving Abraham Lincoln's maxim about fooling people, right?
Yeah, you can't fool all the people all the time. Well, maybe you can. Maybe just they weren't good enough at it before.
You can certainly fool writing Twitter, as I know you've been sparring with some of those guys who are convinced, oh, I need to find an agent and I need a real publisher so then I can be a real author if these
Yeah.
guys in New York who hate me approve of my book.
Yeah, and then you see the numbers, and it's like, I think, something like 15% of traditionally published books have a total net copy move. Like they sell less than a dozen books, like less than 12 copies.
Oh yeah.
So like
If
you
want
think,
some-
that's just like your family. Like if you get your cousins to buy your book, you can outsell, you can be in at least like the top two quartiles of of writers. It's not that hard to break into it as far as sales go. It's just a matter of what they're doing there.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I did the math. I've earned 2 orders of magnitude more than like 99% of trad pub authors, and I'm no Larry Correa or Nick Cole,
Yeah.
right? I'm pretty mid of the mid, but
Yeah.
I'm still making a living doing this.
Yeah, and I don't consider myself like a really super successful author, but I think I did the numbers, and it's like I have oh man, I think this was a couple years ago. Like Eyes in the Walls outsold like every nominee for one of the awards. I think was it the Hugos. It outsold like every nominee
Probably.
in that category by like double. That book has sold like 6,000 copies or something. It's been a big hit. I don't know why people like it so much, but I guess
That's great.
it just hit the right notes. It was an experiment for me. Every book's a little bit of an experiment. I have to kind of see what I'm going to do different each time. It keeps it exciting.
Yeah, congratulations. I mean, I think you hit that sweet spot of like YA horror, or like horror with a younger antagonist was big, and Gen Y nostalgia was getting really big, and I think those two lines intersected for you.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Of course, I have the Gen Y book, and there's actually a Gen Y book that me and Brian are both in that J.D. Cowan put together called Generation Y, The New Lost Generation. And I have a collection with some of those things, plus some more called Afterglow, Generation Y, which is a collection of aphorisms, scenes, and short stories. Some of them I don't even consider stories because there's no conflict. It's just like a nostalgic scene and then on to the next thing. So I call it an aphorism.
Well, speaking of Gen Y and mass media pulling the wool over people's eyes, have you seen that the new current thing is rolling the millennial generation back to like 1979 or 1980?
Yeah. Yeah, this has been a thing. It's like, yeah, you came of age in the millennium. It's like if you were born in 79, you'd been an adult for several years before the millennium hit. You weren't coming of age. You had come of age well before that. And had a very different young adulthood. This is the big separation between Gen X, Gen Y versus millennials. Is Gen Y is a lot closer to Gen X. In fact, they were for a while they were grouped in with Gen X, and then they're like, well, they're Gen Y, they're different. And then millennials were kids born in the 90s because a millennial never didn't have the internet. Let's put it that way. There was never a time in a millennial's life where the internet wasn't available to them, either in school or things like that. When I was in high school, we only had internet on a couple of computers still on the campus. A few computers in the library had internet access. That was it. Like the computers in the actual classrooms, there was no internet attached to them. You couldn't get on the internet in my high school. And I went to a fairly well-to-do high school. It wasn't like some inner city high school. Whereas millennials, it was like, not only is the internet everywhere, but you have the smartphone in your young adulthood. So by the time you get to college, the wireless internet is everywhere. Whereas our childhood was pretty much analog, broadcast TV and cable, very early internet stuff like somebody's GeoCities homepage. That's what the internet was in the 90s. Like this, the internet was almost entirely fan pages of things. Older message boards from like the early 90s and 80s that you had to kind of be a power user to know how to use, and then like I guess startup pornography sites. That was always like the big thing was like, oh, there's all this porn on the internet. It's like, yeah, when you reduce any kind of friction to getting pornography, people will take advantage of that. They don't have to go out to the edge of town to buy, their porno mag. Then they're gonna take that option.
Yeah, as soon as you stopped having to go down to the red light district in a trench coat with the collar pulled up and like furtively like smuggle home a brown paper bag wrapped package, like hoping you weren't caught the whole way home, like that, like turn year's pretty much inevitable after that stopped.
Yeah.
After the shame was gone.
Yeah, and like the train just kept on rolling. So yeah, I think millennials just had a very different childhood experience than Gen Y, the 80s kids. We were kind of still we were like the daycare generation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we had reliable internet in my house until I was either a senior in high school or a freshman in college. Like, I remember having to go to my buddy's mom's office downtown to get on, like, forums and chat rooms and stuff back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it took, the new thing when I was applying for colleges in 2001 was an online application. That was brand new. Like, most places were offering that for the first time that year, and it took hours and hours to fill out because you were doing it on a dial-up modem. No one had high speed yet. High speed, like a cable modem that did 1 megabyte per second was like unheard of. So you would slowly load the web page. You'd enter in all the forms. You'd hit send. You'd patiently wait. Maybe go get a soda while it loaded up. And hopefully it all went through. It was a really interesting. Looking back, it was a very interesting phenomenon. Early internet, like the slowness of it. But yeah, that was new. Versus, I can just Google things. We couldn't Google things. We had the first resource was maybe the encyclopedia copy at the school library. It's like you go down there and pull out the encyclopedia, and maybe your subject was in it.
Remember, like in Carta, like
Mm-hmm.
when the TV commercials would be hawking encyclopedias on like CD-ROM and
Yeah.
Oh, remember the first time that like buying something entirely online became real?
Yes. I remember the first time I bought something online. I don't know if it was Amazon or something else. It was a Monster Magnet CD, because you could not get Monster Magnet CDs at record stores where I was at. Because I lived in Fresno as a teenager, the only record stores, like I think there was like a Warehouse Music, but it didn't, it wasn't that good. But the only way to get like a lot of records was to try to order them through these mail catalogs. So you would fill out a little sheet. This is what it was in the 90s, is like there'd be a record company, you'd fill out a sheet, you'd put it in an envelope with a check, and you'd mail it to them, and you'd hope that the CDs would come in the mail in a couple of weeks. This was like, we ordered the CD and it came in like 5 or 7 days. I had Super Saver shipping, and I got the CDs. And then I had like a budget for buying CDs. I spent $40 on music every month to like build my collection further. Back when having back when having a physical media collection was like a thing, because you couldn't just stream everything or carry it around in an iPod. My friend had a 6 gigabyte MP3 player. I was like, whoa, that's huge. You can carry so much music around. And that 6 megabyte, it had like a hard drive in it,
Don't even need it. Yeah. Yeah, wow. Memories. That really was our adolescence and early adulthood. It was one thing that's always stuck with me from the movie Interstellar was the grandfather's speech, and I think like going by the timeline that the movie's supposed to be set in, that the grandpa is Gen Y. And he says something like, "Well, you know, when I was a kid, it seemed like every day brought something new. You know, some new gadget, some new idea. Like every day was Christmas, right? And that's what it was. Like, oh wow, here's fast internet. Here's purchases online, which I remember economists saying was impossible.
Oh
Would
yeah,
never
yeah.
happen.
There'd never be an online economy. Like, how would you manage all the money? And it's like, that's people forget. Like, that's actually how Elon Musk made his first fortune. Was he was a founder of PayPal. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, how did Elon Musk make money? Is that he's very good at identifying needs and assembling resources to meet that need. The need was we need to be able to move money with online transactions. Like, if you didn't have PayPal, you couldn't operate eBay. So think about how important that payment processor was for enabling the new economy back then. It was extremely important. And there's a reason that it made a lot of money, even though he got basically ousted from the board at some point. He made plenty of money doing it because it met a need. And all the other stuff that he's done since then, if you look at all the companies that he starts or is involved in the startup with, it's like, well, we're perceiving a need, and his needs just start to get further out. You know, it's like, okay, people are going to want a lot more electric cars in a couple of years. So let's figure out how to build a really good one that we can build at scale. And yeah, in 10 years, people are going to really want them. Because I remember 10 years ago, it was like Teslas were a new cool thing and very expensive, and people were wanting to buy them just because they were new and hip. But it wasn't like everyone needs to have an electric car. The government's mandating that you need to have an electric car. That stuff wasn't quite there yet. And I think it's the same thing with SpaceX. It's like we need a private company to send up satellites, to do anything that we want to do in space. Even though SpaceX, you look at it and you're like, I don't see where the profit is. It's like there's a need for us to be able to use global communications, and SpaceX can actually do that. He's just thinking the next thing is like 10 years out, 20 years out. He's just thinking further out as far as needs go. And that's really, I don't want to sit here and like compliment Elon Musk all day, but that's really where his value has come from, is being able to see where people's needs are. And then the other half is being able to assemble those resources to make a company that's going to meet those needs. Kind of being the ringleader and bringing those together. It's not just his money that does it. It's lots of other investors that have gotten rich through his enabling them to have a company.
And you know who's really bad at foreseeing needs and marshaling resources to meet it? Is authors and legacy publishers.
Yeah.
They're just clinging into that old post-World War II paradigm, right? Which is, as you were alluding to, is really a blip on the timeline, because before like World War II, you had like not only small short story magazines proliferating, but like everyone forgets that self-publishing was a big thing before that. Like Poe was self-published, Shakespeare was self-published. It has a longer pedigree than Dreadnought does.
Yeah. Yep. And so, transitioning back towards like talking about patronage and things like that. The whole thing about, if you go back and you look at how artists made money in the 19th century, we'll just go back to the 19th century before mass media. Most artists did a couple of things. You either did sort of direct commissions if you were a visual artist, right? Like you painted portraits because there were no photographs. And a lot of people are very surprised to find out that artists use tools like the camera lucida to paint portraits, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a mirror device that allows you to look at your page, and you can basically see your subject and the page you're drawing on at the same time, so you can trace over them. Makes it really helpful to make a portrait that you can just basically trace over real life to get the form of the person down, and the rest of it is just the detail painting, like, you know, getting the skin tones and stuff right. First of all, people would be surprised, like artists used to just paint tons and tons and tons and tons of portraits for money, but they also used to use all kinds of tools to make that a really fast thing to do. Things that people now would be considered cheating, like tracing, right? People talk lots of crap on Greg Land, a rather famous comic book artist, because it's very obvious he uses, he either traces or uses like photo references really extensively, like they match up perfectly. Well, he gets the comic books done. He's never late. So unlike most comic book artists who can't seem to finish a book in a month, he finishes all his books every month and is a professional and uses the tools available to finish the job that's required of him. And yes, he takes easier paths to do that by using photo references, but he also gets his work done. And the artists in the 19th century were not above using those sorts of things. Most of those cool illustrations you see from the 19th century, how did somebody draw this caterpillar perfectly? Well, they used the camera lucida and put the caterpillar out and then traced it for the technical manual. How did the scientists learn to draw so well? Well, everybody dabbled in the arts because arts are fun to dabble in. It's fun to be an artist. It's fun to draw. But they also were able to use the tools at their disposal to get things done on time and under budget. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up.
No, remember, Thoughton? I vaguely recall a concept like that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so anyway, patronage in the 19th century. So artists either did that, or if they would have basically rich people who would pay them to make art for them in various capacities, whether it was Richard Wagner, who had like basically a circle of noblemen that would pay to have his music dramas put on, or it was someone like Frederick Chopin, who would do these salon performances for rich patrons. They would hire him to come play at their house, private performances for the benefit of their friends. This was a patronage arrangement, and they would like to hear what new music he was doing. They enjoyed him as an artist. And in fact, there was lots of noblemen who would hire these musicians and these artists to train their children, because being able to play piano was considered part of a good upbringing for a woman, and being able to do art was considered part of a good upbringing for a woman or a man, is having artistic depth, being able to know how to play an instrument or do some basic art and be well versed in literature. These were all things that were considered essential to like good upbringing, like being a good citizen in a sense. And so all that was from patronage arrangements. Mozart, of course, was patronized by the emperor. He also taught lots and lots and lots of violin and piano lessons because he was probably the most sought after teacher in Europe, probably because of his good teaching skill, but also his just general musicianship. And in order to cultivate those sorts of relationships, you needed to have patrons. The patrons wanted him to come to their house and teach their daughters how to play piano.
Makes sense.
Yeah, the idea of the modern idea, in contrast, is like you have a writer and he sits at home and bangs out a story on his typewriter, sends it to his publisher, who then publishes it, and then he gets a check and makes money, and that's the life of the writer. But that's kind of a historic anomaly when you look at it. That's not the way things worked prior to the 20th century at all. What allowed that was this big, giant corporate infrastructure where you could sell books at scale enough that you could just pay, buy a story from a writer, pay them money, and then publish it and keep the money yourself as a publisher, rather than what used to happen, which was, like you said, Shakespeare was self-published, right? The artists would put on their own things. They did things themselves, not through a publisher or like a management company or something like that. The idea that your record company could decide all your stuff about going on tour, that would be bizarre to musicians in the 19th century.
Right, exactly. And what happened was all these big gatekeepers, these New York publishers, these West Coast record labels, they developed vertically integrated monopolies. So in the case of publishing, you had the publishers, who they had special sweetheart deals with bookstores and with printers. So really, as indie author Joe Conrad says, they're not really in the book business, they're in the lumber business.
Yeah. So I love that word, vertically integrated monopolies. If you guys don't know how publishing works, how can a traditionally published book sell 12 copies? Like, how did they just print 12? Well, they actually printed like thousands. So what happens is they send a book to the printer. The publisher is not the printer, by the way. A lot of people have this idea that the publisher, they imagine a big box that has printing presses in it, and the publisher somehow makes the book into the printing presses. Like, no, the publisher buys the rights from the author and then sends it to the printer, who then prints it, and really probably hires a typesetter if it's going to be a really big run, like, you know, J.K. Rowling or something, and they'll typeset it in like the old-fashioned way because that works at scale, and then they'll print it. So they send it over to the printer. Now it's all done digitally. The printer prints it for them. Then they will send it out to a bunch of bookstores. In some cases, they have a wholesaler which does everything, and the publisher never touches the books or takes possession of them ever. A lot of people don't know that, but the bookstores get the books. If the books don't sell, the bookstore goes up. We've had this book on the shelf for 6 months. We haven't sold it. They destroy the book. They throw it in the garbage or they burn it. They incinerate the book. They'll take the dust jacket off, send it back to the publisher in a box with all the other dust jackets from the things that didn't sell. And then the publisher writes them off at a loss on its taxes. So it's actually advantageous, and it's not disadvantageous, I should say, to print 5,000 books and sell 12, because you write off all the remaining as a loss, and it makes your balance sheet work out. So a lot of individuals, someone's like, at what point does it make sense for like you to have a publisher? And I'm like, well, it never doesn't make sense to do print on demand, because that's what publishers mostly do. But there's a point where, like, if you're going to sell a lot of copies, you can print them yourself and mail them. But most independent authors are not in the business of holding large amounts of inventory and dealing with that. And they don't have the advantage of being able to burn their own books and then write them off on their taxes. Most indies are not going to do that. So anyway, that's the way the book business works. A lot of people don't realize that, but that's how they're able to print 5,000 copies, sell 12, and still be in business the next year.
Yeah, and that doesn't even get into remainders and the fact that the publisher will then refund the bookseller for unsold copies. It's really this weird consignment system that's super archaic, and that, as any listener who's been paying attention can see, was left behind by technology decades ago.
Yeah, and I've proven this with a couple of products. Was like, this is a print-on-demand book. It's made in the same place as the other books. It's the exact same trim size, same paper, same everything. And in fact, it's clear that they took their files from a differently sized book and just put them in the Amazon 6x9 and did print-on-demand for it, because that makes more sense than trying to do additional print runs of a weird-sized book. Just put it in the 6x9 and do it all print on demand, and then you never have to deal with the book. It makes a lot more sense than the old way of, like, we got to print off 1,000 copies, see if we sell those. They sold out, we'll print off 5,000 copies. Once those are sold off, we'll do a third run. Like, that's the way it used to be done in the 20th century, because there was no other real way to do it. You would do, and this is where a lot of book collecting comes from, like, the first print run of Dune is very expensive. But the second and third are basically worthless, because once it was a certified hit, they would just print off 10,000 copies and not really think about it, you know?
Yeah. So, again, back in the 20th century, the old pub model made sense, because if you're an author and you want to reach the largest audience possible, they were really the only game in town, because to get your book read, you really had to get it into bookstores. And Old Pub had this cartel in place that you needed to go through them to get on the shelves. But as we've been discussing behind the scenes for a while now, in the beginning of the previous decade, something happened, which often happens to geriatric industries and business models on their way out, which was creative disruption and disintermediation, when Amazon unleashed the Kindle on the world. How about we talk about that?
Yeah. So this was probably, the event which killed the recording industry, the record industry, was whenever Napster went live. That obliterated the recording industry, and the numbers back that up. Although people will try to pretend that them downloading huge reams of music illegally didn't affect, it did. It destroyed the recording industry. What destroyed the book industry was the Kindle. The fact that somebody could store their whole library on a single device, which they could buy things through, which they could easily, Amazon did actually a really good job with the WhisperNet too, where you could buy a book and they basically rented wireless networks. So even if you weren't at home, it would still be able to send the book to your Kindle. Really, actually, very cool. It's now completely deprecated, is my understanding. But when it came out, you couldn't really expect to have Wi-Fi wherever you were at, or to tie it to a phone. Phones didn't have Wi-Fi, so they rented 3G networks and would deliver your book wirelessly to your Kindle without you having to log into anything. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, I've also posted a handy infographic in our Discord chat with a chart of music industry revenues since like the early 70s. And it not only backs up what you just said, it's got some interesting insights because you can pinpoint exactly when Napster went live on there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like I said, a lot of people don't they want to undersell it because of their own behavior when they were young, which was and I don't blame people for this, because if you think about how music was in the 90s, it was like your CDs were $18 or $20. $18 or $20 in 1999 is the equivalent of like $40 today, just to put things in perspective. So your $18 or $20 CD you would buy, and of course all the record stores have gotten away from letting you hear something before you bought it. And then you would buy it because there was a song on the radio that was played 20 times a day that you might like, and so you buy it, and then the record was bad, and so you'd be upset. You're like, I paid $18 and this record really isn't very good. It's one of the reasons that I think like my general feeling about 90s music is that it sucked, is because there were so many of these like one-hit wonder records where there was just one song that people liked on the CD and everything else was bad. So when they had the opportunity to not be completely gouged for a garbage product, they took it. Well, yeah, I'll just download the one song I like, and then I can get a Metallica album too. You know, why not? I'll get things that are actually good on my way there. So I don't really blame people for doing it, because music was very expensive at the end of the 90s to buy. The record industry had taken all the advantages it could with the broadcast industry, which had been completely monopolized. Another one of those like verticalized monopolies in the 90s, where Clear Channel Communications owned every radio station, could therefore decide what every radio station played. It would make a choice of 10 or 15 songs that would play all day long. Whatever they decided would be a hit, because that would be literally the only music you could hear, would be whatever Clear Channel decided to play on the radio. So whatever they played would obviously sell well, because there was nothing else to compete. There was no other music people could hear.
Yeah, funny how that works. And that's exactly the kind of industry that, like, when you have to start resorting to monopolistic tactics like that, it's a good sign the smart money is already headed out the door and the Reaper's nipping at your heels.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the same thing that you described happening in music happened with Old Pub. I mean, we saw them go from the big six to the big five, and now like they would be the big four, but for like some sort of court order, which is delaying the merger, like Random House and Simon and Schuster or something, and
yeah.
So they just keep getting a bigger and bigger share of a smaller market, and they don't sell because the numbers are in. And since I think 2014, Newpub authors' earnings have gone up by 50% at about the same time that Old Pub authors' earnings have gone down by around the same amount, a little more actually.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just taking their market share.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, it's one of these disruptive events. I would say it's, you know, as far as like the corporate period in the arts starts in the early 20th century and really starts to close at the beginning of the 21st century. The music industry was really the first to go because of music sharing, and the reason it was the first to go is because it was the most monopolized and the lowest quality product with the biggest amount of price gouging. And then the next was probably books. Games weren't really a super mature industry by that time, but we still have lots of indie games, so it never really went through they're having their own corporate period of the arts moment in AAA gaming right now. But the indies are already there to steal as much of the market share as is possible And I think a lot of gamers are doing that. They're just not buying the super slick, high graphics AAA games that they think aren't going to be fun. They're instead buying remasters of PS2 games and indie games. And I can't blame them. I made a point that, like, you could make a very good point that the best RPG on the PlayStation 4 was actually Final Fantasy 12, which is a PS2 game, right?
That's a great game.
And I think it's a good, like, I'm thinking of all the RPGs I played on the PS4, and Final Fantasy 12 was the best one. You know, Final Fantasy 15 came out on it, but Final Fantasy 12 was just better than Final Fantasy 15 in every way, including like aesthetics. Though Final Fantasy 15, I guess, had sharper graphics. It didn't have better art, in my opinion. So yeah, I think you could make a point with that. There's something a little bit weird with that. Like, imagine someone saying, yeah, the best game on the Super Nintendo is Super Mario Brothers 3. What?
Yeah, that would be absurd. That would have been absurd to say that. Like,
you would be like, yeah, Super Mario 3 is good. You know, I like Super Mario All-Stars, but it's not. You can't say that's the best game on the Super Nintendo. That's nonsense. That's just a little. That's just a little Nintendo game with more colors.
Did you catch the Marion imagery in FF15 though?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I haven't talked about it. I need to do like a good analysis video.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot in Final Fantasy 15 that. It's just really good. I think it's way better than people gave it credit for. Even me, when I first played it, I'm like, oh, I don't like this like driving around Southern California thing. Because that's kind of what it is. You're driving around Southern California, but there's fantasy stuff there. There's demons. So it's not that different from Southern California.
Try the land crab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I ended up really enjoying the game the more I played it. And the ending I thought actually ended up being really good. It was like a very bittersweet kind of ending, which they tend to do all right with Final Fantasy games. So, I think Final Fantasy 15 is underrated, but I still think Final Fantasy 12 is the better game. It just has such fun gameplay, such a fun world, such cool art.
Well, if you want bittersweet endings, gotta go with 10. Which, for my money, is the best ending in the whole series.
Yeah, 10 has a great one, and then they somehow made a sequel to it. One of the weirdest game sequels I've ever played is the Final Fantasy X-2. If you've never played it, guys, you got to at least like try Final Fantasy X-2. It's one of the strangest. Well, I say it's one of the strangest sequels. Rather than like taking the gameplay of the first game and doing like a new game with it, they took all of the maps and resources and art of the first game and put new gameplay on it. Like, just the complete opposite of what people usually do with a sequel. They did with Final Fantasy X-2. It's bonkers. The music's all over the place. There's like this weird plot about Yuna being like a pop singer thing. Like, it's just weird. And then you're like, they're trying to resolve the ending of Final Fantasy X. It's like, it doesn't need. It was resolved. It was like a great ending. It was a great way to end it. It ends as it begins. You know.
Isn't it like a weird Barbie dress-up game in the Final Fantasy universe?
So you switch classes and your characters will like throw on a new outfit and then they'll be a different class. Which I think in the early 2000s, like my brother-in-law, he was like, I played it for about 20 minutes and it was the girliest thing I ever played, and I turned it off and never played it again. And I was like, I think this game was actually made for boys.
Oh.
But because it's full of fan service kind of stuff, right? When you look at media in Japan made for males, it's full of this kind of thing. Stuff like Rosario plus Vampire. It's like, do boys like pop music? Well, they actually do in a lot of cases. But mostly they like pretty girls, and they think the dress-up stuff is fun because it makes them look hot, you know? So it actually, I think, was more male-targeted than people in the West realized, because our male targeting tends to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Like, you're seeing the male, versus Japan's male targeting is like, look at the female form, because that's what you like to look at, right? Being a male, you enjoy the female form, so we're gonna have lots of that.
Well, as the late great 4 p.m. Shinzo Abe left us with his parting words.
Yeah.
Yeah, see you, Space Cowboy. But,
yeah. See you, Space Cowboy. Get guys. Shinzo Abe says to reproduce. So you should do it. Let's take a look at some of Brian's Patreon tiers here, because I think it's cool to look at what he's offering for this. So Neo-patronage, why don't you give me a little rundown of your definition of Neo-patronage? This is new version of patronage. Rather than the Lord patronizing you, everybody has a chance to interact directly with the artist.
Exactly.
It's more democratized. I hate that word, but that's it.
Yeah.
When I hear democratized, I'm imagining my blue-haired, some blue-haired union rep talking to me about democratization. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll use it.
It's a word we have. I'm allowing the great unwashed masses to influence my art, and the show this far has been a great segue into it, because whereas first you had patronage, and then you had artists self-publishing or publishing through periodicals or in trade magazines, and then you had the old pub vertical paper monopoly. Then we were in the Amazon age, and I think you and others in our circles, including Pulp Archivist, who is a patron of mine, have pointed out that we are now at the end of the Amazon age.
Yeah, this is what we really need to talk about. We've been nostalging on different things, but yes, the end of the Amazon age. Very short age, but why don't you tell me about that?
Yeah, I'd love to get your take too, but it's just that, KDP was great for about 5 minutes, and then it just kept getting worse and worse, because, technocrat bugman got a bugman, and instead of trying to connect customers with the products that meet their needs and connect sellers with the customers who want their stuff, they went off in their holy quest in search of the machine god, and thought they'd unleashed it on a consumer shopping site. And no, instead it just broke everything. So as you recently said, a customer can go and enter the exact title, author, and even ASIN or ISBN of a book, and you'll get 2 pages of ads for just shilled payola merch until you get the book you want.
Yeah, and that's it. And I was talking to my wife about this. I'm like, here was the old, I'll give you guys the Amazon model, which I've talked about on the channel, and which has actually not functioned, I would say, for almost 2 years now. It's been non-functional, and it's had reduced functionality for longer than that. And it's to the point where a lot of the old gurus that I used to keep tabs on are like, I'm getting out of this business. And including cover designers, I'm not going to design covers for people anymore, because I feel like it's unethical. They're just going to lose money. There's no way for them to make money anymore. I can't with a good conscience provide author services to someone who thinks that it's going to produce money for them. Or I have to filter people in such a way that's I'll do this for you for this amount of money, but you're aware that you're probably going to sell nothing no matter how good this is. That it, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's basically been non-functional for 2 years, where the old model was you would put a book on Amazon, you would promote that book either through advertising or maybe social media, or you'd use a whole bunch of different strategies. Maybe you'd advertise on Facebook, YouTube, you'd advertise on Amazon's website, and you'd throw money at that advertising. You'd rank the book up to a certain rank, and Amazon would then sell the book for you. And so once you got that rank up, you could stop spending money on ads. You could turn your ads off. And as long as you were a high enough rank in the keywords that you were shooting for, Amazon would just present that. Someone would type in whatever genre you were in, sci-fi mech novel. Boom, there'd be Brian Niemeier at the top. In the top 5, there'd be 5 books that hit that. Yours would be at the top because it ranked high, and Amazon would continue to show it to people, and so the ranking would stay there. You would stick. And that's how you would make money doing it. Now that doesn't work, because you can get to number 1 in your category. You turn off the ads, and then you drop into the 3rd page, because the first page is all nothing but ads. And then after the ads are things that aren't related. You type in, sci-fi mech novel by Brian Niemeier, and boom, the first two things are ads for vampire novels, and then the next three things are like Build-A-Mech kits, and then whatever thing is for the user's algorithm. So if I did it for me, it'd be like, here's some guitar parts, and then on the second page, I'd finally find Brian's book. That's how it is now. So like you can't expect customers to organically come across your book based on what they're looking for, their wants and needs. You can't expect Amazon to suggest your book to somebody, even if they would like it, which is the whole point of the algorithm. And it's one of the things I love best about YouTube is that YouTube really does point people towards content that they enjoy. It still is really functional for that. But on Amazon, it's really completely non-functional unless you are spending a lot of money on ads and you're hitting the keyword target really correctly. So, sorry. So like you'd have to have your keywords be like Brian Niemeier mech novel. That would be your keyword, so that if someone would type that in looking for it, yours would show up as a sponsored result, and you'd have to pay $1.25 for the person to click on it. Well, there goes all of your profit, right? $1.25 will just destroy your ability to make any kind of royalties on Amazon. But that's like the price of cost per click. Last time I looked, it was like in this category, I'd have to pay $1 to rank up to the top. $1 for a click? That's insane. I used to pay 5 cents for a click, and I would sell through enough copies that like all my ads would make money. Now, no ads make money. They all lose money. It's impossible to make money with ads unless you're pricing your book really expensive, and somehow people will buy it anyway. They won't. They're not gonna. They might click on it, but I'm not buying a $20 book. They're not going to do that unless you're selling like The Secret to Immortality for $20. Then they'll buy it, maybe. But
yeah, that reminds me of the.
They're not buying my fantasy books.
When I looked into the 20 bucks to 50K crowd, like for the big secret, and it turned out to be like drop $5,000 a month in AMS to sell $2,000 worth of royalties. And how do you make it up? Volume. I'm like, I don't think that's math.
Yeah, I think this is like step 1, collect underpants. Phase 3, profit.
And spend $5,000 on underpants. Okay.
And this, this by the way was one of those okay, so I'll just tell you that there's way more money in author services than there is in selling books, especially fiction books. Nonfiction, you could still make a killing at, but you have to be selling something that's really good. But like for fiction books, it's way easier to make money selling someone an ads course, like having people come to your ads course, selling them like some sort of promotion package or cover package, all the author services that go into like marketing the book and making the book exist. There's more money in that than in just selling a book. So all the successful indie authors really quickly transition to come to my seminar on how to do Amazon AdWords. And that's how they make their money. Well, now the Amazon AdWords don't even work, and a lot of them are like, I have to figure out something else to do because my method just doesn't work. It just it doesn't work anymore.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in there not just because I'm an editor who does do his best to help authors, especially new authors, put out their best book. And the key to what you just said is that these guys focus on Amazon. They have fallen into the same trap as Newpub in getting ideologically attached to a particular platform, and it doesn't work anymore. Mm-hmm. And you know what I did? Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say this was the part that I was like, I don't know, dancing around. Was like, they say I have $100,000 in revenue. I'm like, well, revenue is not profit. How much are you spending on ads? $80,000. Okay. You spend a lot of time making $20,000 a year then. But you do have a bestseller. You did buy yourself that orange tag. Good job. It's hard. It's actually hard to do that.
Yeah, go drive a forklift, dude. Heck, if you're only interested in margins, go sell crack. That's like the best margin business there is. Well,
it reminds me of that article, The Problem with the Music Business by who am I thinking of? The producer of Nirvana's In Utero.
Oh, is it from NME?
Yeah, he's like
Butch Vig?
No. I don't know why his name just slipped out of my head, but anyway, he's like, the band goes on tour for 6 months, and or goes on tour for a month, and they make less money than they would have made working at 7-Eleven, but they were on a bus, so that's cool. Basically, that like the artist just makes no money unless they're at the very top of the hill. And that's kind of how it is with like the Amazon book publishing. Like the top 1% are the only ones that can make any money, and everybody else is like, oh, I lost $1,500 on my book when I do the numbers, you know.
Oh, and you're right. It's Steve Albini.
Steve Albini, that's it, yeah. And he really, so like, it's not like the music industry collapsed and it was bad for artists. It's like it was bad for artists before the collapse too. We have to be honest. I think the publishing industry was bad for writers before the collapse as well. And I think Amazon honestly was pretty bad for writers before this is starting to draw to a close. Anyway, now you go ahead with what you're saying. You weren't going to just attach yourself to Amazon.
No, and in fact, as people have been following me closely know, I've been slowly distancing myself from KDP for about 5 years. Ever since the first Combat Frame Exceed, really, because I kind of saw the writing on the wall. And there are far better ways to get your book out there, get it in front of eyeballs, and make way more money. It is far easier. There are far easier ways to actually make a decent ancillary income or even a living like I do without Amazon. And that is Neo-patronage. You asked me where this model came from. Through trial and error, through my own, really just stumbling upon it, honestly.
Yeah, I see. I had anyway, I was going to say, I remember Vox Day did the math years ago. And the math said that it wasn't worth it to put your book in Kindle Unlimited, because if somebody read through your book, it made less money than if they just bought the book. And a lot of people aren't going to read all the way through the book. So it's better to just try to sell a copy of a book. Like the math doesn't work out at all.
Yeah, KU is kind of an attempt by Amazon, I think, to like stop the bleeding or something. I don't know. They, again, like Technocrat Bugman, they just keep throwing the spaghetti at the wall and trying all these experiments.
Yeah, I mean, and I throw a lot of spaghetti at walls. One of the things I figured out, like going back to this, like spending money on ads, is like, well, I'd rather rank my book up by selling it I'll make hot content that gets views. So, and then people buy the book from that, and that ranks it up. Now that worked for a little while, but now that doesn't work. Like I can sell a lot of books week one, and then boop, it drops off the front page because Amazon fills up the front page with unrelated stuff and ads. Just how it is,
yeah.
So if I'm selling the book through YouTube, right, I might as well sell it directly, right? Like sell it off my website, or do sell it through the crowdfund and then off my website. And then, it's on Amazon too if you want to do that. Now, another thing that's interesting about Patreon, and Patreon just launched this, was Patreon, you can actually sell your digital goods directly through Patreon now. So there's another option, right? Like I could just put my books on Patreon. It's like, you don't have to use Amazon. You can get it from there. The benefit of Patreon, and I found this out when I dropped my Patreon years ago. Like I still have a subscribe star, but I dropped Patreon because I wasn't happy with the way that they treated people, because they were banning lots of people. And a lot of my fans were like, Patreon bad. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not making a ton of money from Patreon, so it's okay for me to just not use Patreon. That's a mistake for a number of reasons, but Patreon is what I would call a trusted platform. And trusted platforms are really important for consumers. The idea that if I put in my credit card info into this website, I'm not going to have it stolen means a lot. And Patreon has that. Versus like putting your credit card on my Shopify thing on my personal website. Now I can have that option, but most people are going to be like, I'd rather buy it from Amazon because I trust Amazon. I already have an Amazon account.
Yeah, and as you may have seen on my Twitter, this is a problem you and I run into all the time, are the platform purity trolls. Those guys are like, oh, well, look at how many people hate you, says the guy whose book is on KDP. I'm like, well, yeah, at the time at least, KDP is the book industry. So you're basically telling me you want me to go out of business.
Yeah.
Like you just want corporate slop forever. That's what I'm hearing. And now, so okay, we and myself off Amazon are like, oh, now you're on Patreon. Patreon's impure. It's like, okay, well, I got a subscribe star too, because I launched both, as you guys at home can see in the show notes. And whoa, Maybe Dick 2. There's a puff of smoke. Where the platform troll used to be like, hey, where you at, platform troll? I thought you were concerned for my welfare. Aren't you gonna put your money where your mouth is? I'm on Subscribe Star, and that's the one that like Jordan Peterson and Sargon of Akkad back. What?
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna support Newpub. Where are you? Where'd you go?
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing is, we could talk. Let's actually talk a little bit, because you actually have a degree in Catholic theology, right?
Correct.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the ethics of, I don't know what to call it, like remote cooperation with evil.
Yeah.
I fall back on Thomas Aquinas, because he makes these arguments. If you haven't read the Summa Theologica, or you haven't read any Aquinas, his arguments are actually really easy to understand, very succinct, and in a lot of cases just bulletproof. And one of them is like, for instance, usury. I'll use usury as the example because it's just the one that's on the front of my mind. He says, is it immoral to make use of usury? In other words, to borrow money from a usurer. He says it's not, if you have a good end in mind, and as long as you are not causing the usurer to go into sin. They're a usurer by profession. They're like a loan shark. You using or not using them makes no effect. Like they're still doing their doing, and you're going to use that money to good effect, like for a good end, then you can do it. Just like how if somebody swears to a God that doesn't exist, that they're going to follow you, you don't have to like disregard them. You can make use of those kinds of men, as long as to the intended end is good. And so this is the case with a lot of like remote cooperation. Yeah, there's people at Patreon that we would consider bad, or we don't agree with, or they do bad things. Me being on Patreon or not being on Patreon doesn't affect Patreon. They're still here, right? I stopped using Patreon years ago. They didn't go away, right? It's the same thing with YouTube. If I took myself off YouTube, does YouTube go away? No. Okay, so can I make a good use of them? And the answer is yes, I can. I can support myself, which is good, and I do things which are good. And I'm not going to call myself a good person; that would be too far. But I'm a Christian. We'll just say that, right? Because that's true. I can make good use of these to good ends, and the alternative is as such that I can't make the same good use, right? Like doing Subscribe Star only is less of a good end than utilizing Patreon to the extent that people want to interact with that platform. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, I mean, not bad thinking. I mean, here, to amplify on what you said, there are a few factors that go into any moral calculus, right? So yeah, one is proximity or remoteness, as you brought up. Another is formality or informality, like, do you will the evil moral object? Mm-hmm. Right? I don't think any of us will actively what Patreon's like ulterior motives are, right? We're not with their, for want of a better term, woke agenda. Yeah. But then there is proportionality. Now, if you make proportion, like basically, well, more good came out than evil, your only criterion, you're a consequentialist, and that is a heresy. But it's not irrelevant. So, for example, what I tell people is, okay, Patreon takes like 10%, all right? Just to break it down. Amazon takes 30. Old Pub takes 85.
Yeah. Yeah, and
so I'm doing what I can to lessen, to minimize my cooperation.
I got a $1,200 advance on my book. It's like, great. How long is it going to take you to earn back that advance at 15% or less? It's going to take a while.
That's your chance of ever being it back. Yeah.
And this is a point I make is like, well, why did you decide to learn cover design to design your own covers? It's like, well, if I could design my own cover, that means as soon as I start selling books, like within a very short window frame, I'm in the black for the investment of like the marketing materials and things like that, right? Like it's much quicker to make a book profitable if you can do more of these things yourself. Do you know what I mean? So like that's one of the reasons that I did that was like, hey, I can I can get into the black a little bit more quickly, I'm all for it. And then I learned a skill that I enjoy, and I got to share that skill with lots of other people and with lots of other authors to hopefully help them be able to more quickly get into the place where they're actually earning money rather than paying back their investment, paying off their investment. You know what I mean?
I do, and that's what I mean by neo-patronage. Like it's as simple as that. It's just the new form that the old patronage model is taking, and instead of like wealthy merchants or nobles being the only ones to back art, you can back art.
Yeah.
That's it. Like for example, speaking of profits, I would say that super chats, which you are starting to get here, are a form of neo-patronage. Like you guys are paying David Stewart to perform a service that you would like to answer your questions.
Yeah. So yeah, Adrian says that's Gen Z Val. His name's Adrian. He was a former student of mine. Hopefully he doesn't like remember me too poorly, right? I was thinking about this, writing that thread on like why homework is stupid. I was like, I have a lot of students that there's some students that are going to hate me and there's some that are going to love me. And I've had a couple come back. I think I had one named Christian, and he ran into me. He goes, man, you were like the only teacher who like taught me real things that I used in my life my senior year. It's like you told me how to like find a job and make a business and make money. And it's like, now I have a job as a mechanic and like I'm doing really good. It's like, that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. It's like the fact that no teacher would give you advice on like, here's how you find a job and what you write on a job application, what you say in the job interview. You say, man, I just really want to work and I want to learn these skills and I want to know this business. And it's like, I said that and I got a job. It's like, yeah, employers love to hear things like that you're like excited to learn their business. That means that you're going to be like you're going to be a good employee. Anyway, I know there's some that are not going to like me, and that's okay too, because unfortunately public education's one size fits all, and I'm not one size fits all. Some kids are not going to match with me. Anyway, as someone who's working on a book currently and hoping to build an audience and make a career as an author, I'm immensely curious to hear about alternatives to Amazon. So that's what we're talking about. One of them is building patronage. The hardest part, I think, is finding the audience right now. This is the area that I think is gray for a lot of authors, because that old Amazon method doesn't work. You can't just buy your way into readers' wallets, if that makes any sense. Like you can't buy readers anymore. It just, the ads are so complicated, the investment is so steep, and there's so little return. I just wouldn't recommend it. So you have to look outside that. I don't know if there's what's that site? Wattpad? Maybe you could build a readership on that. Maybe you could build a readership on one of these other little platforms that are full of young people that like old people like me just never interact with, because we're always like, where's my books and my fully, right? Maybe it's making visual novels. I still really want to make a visual novel, but I've my life has gotten really busy the last 2 years, moving across the country and doing this hellish garage remodel that I just finished. Like, you have to do the things I have to do things sort of as time allows. And so eventually, I'd like to make a visual novel, because I think there's so many young people that interact with fiction that like that interactive mode to a book, rather than just reading it as like a straight novel. Doesn't mean I'll stop writing straight novels, because prose is my love. Like, I love prose. That's what makes a novel a novel. Whereas to me, a visual novel is like, I could make, it's a different form of drama. It's great. So maybe it's making visual novels for people. Maybe it's doing short stories. Maybe it's building an audience by developing your skills writing short stories and submitting to magazines like Kursova. I don't know what it's going to be, but you have to kind of try different avenues out. And if one doesn't work, that's okay. You just shift your focus to another one. You know what I mean? So that's the hard part, is you got to find readers. If you can find readers, then the next question is, well, how do you get them to pay you for what you're doing? And, we're still coming up with solutions. One of them is neo-patronage. So the hard part is getting the readers. After you have the readers, the less hard part is, quote, I hate to use this word, but monetizing them, right? Which is like turning them from fans who like you to fans who want to support you as an artist and want to pay you for your work. That's actually less difficult than just finding the readers to begin with.
Well, that's one of the great parts of neo-patronage is, okay, look, so agreeing with you, if you're going to be an author, you got to have a platform. Okay, there's no way around it. you've got to build your own platform. Even Old Pub will not lend you their platform, not at like its full grandeur and reach, unless you're already famous or a politician or Stephen King or something, right?
Yeah.
Like they will tell you to get signed, like, okay, well, where's your 20,000 Twitter followers? Where's your like 60K blog following? Where's your LinkedIn? We want to see that first, right? Where's your Substack? Where's your Medium? So you made us like you need to build it anyway. So that's one place you find your readers. What's great about Patreon and Subscribestar is they combine that. Like they come with blogs.
Yeah.
So as you can see on mine, like if we go back to like the merchant and first tiers, like the first thing you get for $5 a month is access to my patron only posts, because you can do posts on Subscribestar and Patreon and lock them by tier.
Yeah.
So I've got some public facing content on there anyone can see, but then I've got free posts. I've got free books. The first books in both of my hit series are available free to the first 2 tiers of patrons. And then also they have great Discord integration. So I've got a rollicking good discussion going on between some of the guys in the chat now and some of the other patrons about like the history of pulp and about Conan and about like light novels. It's a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could do anything. There's so many different little demographics and audiences to find. I did a big Twitter thread on this, and then I made a video and came out with it yesterday, basically with the same information, just a little bit more expanded. So how do you find an audience? That is a big question. So I gave a couple of strategies, and the biggest one is just making content. So if you can make content, then you can find an audience eventually. And as long as the content is high quality and attention grabbing, you're going to be able to attract at least a couple of people towards you. And over time, that following builds up. But, we'll give an example of content. Nonfiction is probably like the I don't say the easiest, but it's the most profitable, the biggest slam dunk you can make. So Adam Lane Smith, who I think you've edited some of his books, or he's a friend of yours. He's
also the Emperor.
Yeah, he's a psychologist, and he also wrote fiction, but he kind of shifted his business focus towards psychology. And so, what do you do to sell psychology? Well, you write a book that solves a problem. So his problem was, I think, attachment issues. So he said, I'm going to be an attachment expert, and I'm going to write my my book on being that like affirms my expertise in this. He makes bunches of content that's like, this is talking about this thing. It attracts people who are interested in that problem because maybe they have that problem, because they maybe have those traumas in the past. Then they look at the book. The book, of course, gives more information, more ideas for how to help yourself. And then that book, in turn, gets them interested in the high value, therapy sessions, like private therapy, which is going to make you even more money. So it's kind of like a funnel that pushes the people who really need your services towards them little by little. And people who are on the outside, who just need a little bit of help, well, they get that help. And it works that way. It's a little harder with fiction because your content, I have found that content which is fiction does not sell itself, right? If I put out a free audiobook of a story, very few people will watch it. But if I put out like a really good couple pieces of content and then say, buy the book, more people will buy it than will listen to it for free. More people will buy it than will read it for free. That seems very weird, but it's really about how the audience hits you, and then they're like, oh, I like what this guy says. I bet this book will be good. Essentially, you're selling the quality of the book with your content. And there's lots of ways that you can do that. Now, Brian has lots of free content on how to write and how to edit your book. And then, of course, if you get value from that, you can hire Brian as an editor for your book and get even more value out of that, like get the full depth of the knowledge and that direct connection, right? So Brian does sell editing services, in case you guys don't know. He doesn't just sell Patreon. But if you're a friend of the stream, by the way, I did have another super chat from Sound Engraver. I do appreciate the super chat. these marketing artist streams are the best. I really appreciate that, and I want you to get value out of them. I want people to be able to be successful. So anyway, like Brian has tons of content on how to be a great writer, and you can hire him as an editor. So those sorts of things are a little easier versus what content do I make to sell fiction? That's harder. You have to kind of think about your market for what kind of fiction you want to write, what market you're pursuing, and what kind of content they want to interact with. So science fiction fans might watch content on Star Trek. I found Star Wars fans are not really willing to buy a lot of stuff that isn't Star Wars. That's okay. Mm-hmm. That's just part of how that fandom works. Some people sell it through politics. I mentioned this. You make a bunch of political posts, and even though your fiction is not related, people want to support you and your perspective, and therefore they buy the book. This is like the Matt Walsh strategy. It's like you have a garbage children's book that no one would actually read to their children, and you sell it to people who agree with you politically.
Yeah.
So that's another way to do it.
Yeah, quality is a factor. Like, for example, you mentioned Orange Tags. Well, my most recent release, the second Combat Frame Exceed Illustrated Tech Guide, right? It's a companion piece to my Beckham LSF series. Got to #1 in its category. Like, I didn't even really have to try that hard. And near as I can tell, I think what did it was some of the interior art, some of the new interior art that, which is actually done by Nick in chat here, Nick and Low, that one of my readers did, like, he featured it in his like weekly Newpub new book showcase and highlighted some of that new art. So there are always these Black Swan events, but like selling success is really the intersection of preparation and luck.
Yeah.
It really is. But you can always maximize your chances of being ready when luck hits.
Yeah, I say, like, you know, you're kind of buying a lottery ticket, but it's not just random numbers. There's always a randomness. I do have an ad coming up here. It says ads will run shortly for some viewers. Apparently YouTube is doing some automated ads. So here comes an advertisement.
Can't wait to see what for.
I don't know. Ads inserted. Wow, that's cool. That's a new feature.
Do you get a cut of that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember what the cut is. Yeah. This is another value of YouTube, is like YouTube actually provides a lot of different ways for you to maximize your money that you make with YouTube, kind of little by little. Like, I could actually do memberships for the YouTube channel. Like, I probably will enable them, but I haven't done it because I just feel like there's not a lot of exclusive value I could offer with that. I could just make it as, like, it's an option. You can do it through YouTube if you want to support me, and that's cool. Like, you know, like a bunch of, I don't make so much content that I can just have a lot of walled off little secret content just for, just for the special membership viewers. But it's an option, right? And then you can increase the amount of ads. They'll automate the ads to generate the most revenue. And people often complain in the comments. They're like, why did this video have so many ads? I'm like, it's because it's a hit, man. It had 50,000 views. They up the ads on it because they know people are really wanting to watch the whole video. So, you know, you can hate YouTube, but I think they actually do a pretty good job with a lot of that stuff. Adrian has another super chat. I liked you a lot as a teacher. In fact, I'll always be grateful for your class because I met one of my 2 best friends in your guitar class. That's awesome. That's great. Friend for a season.
Are we on?
Friend for a lifetime. A super chat from Zimamaru. Brian, are your editing services available right now? I appreciate the super chat.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it on David's behalf as well. Okay, so right now, I am tentatively booked up through the rest of the year. So it depends on when your book is going to be done and ready for the editor's desk. My soonest definite opening is going to be the first of the year, but send me an email at soulcyclebooks@gmail.com and we'll talk. It depends on the length of your project. Might be able to squeeze you in. Thanks. And that does give me a segue to talk about why editing and why cover design and why proper formatting are still important. And in the context you were talking about, David, like, yeah, in terms of like Christian morality, you don't want to exploit people, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't just want to extract money from people who can't afford it, like from the poor. That does largely depend, I've found, on the customer base that you are selling to. So as I have widened my net and also learned to target my efforts better, like I have found, like most of the clients whose books I've edited over the past couple of years are guys who've been writing nonfiction and they're like already pretty big in their niche. So it's not so much that like they're counting on the royalties from this book to pay the light bill, right? It's that this book is like my credential in my industry
Yeah.
to prove my bona fides, and then like it becomes the core of like my marketing for my course or for my software or for my blog or for my company, right?
Yeah. What did Josh Lysett call it? He had a really good term for it. It was like your expert book or something like that. He had a term for what that book was. Like it's like you're basically like your proof of expertise, like your proof of
Yeah, it's like your credential.
Yeah.
It's kind of the new degree,
Mm-hmm.
really, which is kind of cool. Wish I could have written my own, but
Yeah, it's true.
the church won't let me do that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a friend in college who had been a professional opera singer, in New York, and it's like he somehow got it so he didn't have to do like a senior recital. I was like, "How'd you do that?" He goes, "My senior recital is 10 years of doing this at the highest level. They're just letting me not do it." It's like, okay, cool. Like, really, that senior recital that you need to pass out of your music degree is the proof of your degree. Putting out a good album is really the proof that like you know what you're doing as a musician, and it ought to be. Authority book. That's it. Raul Neonzi.
There we go.
It's the authority book.
Roll.
I'm the authority in this area. Here's my book that proves that I'm the authority.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Thank you, Raul. And however, I didn't want to just leave that off and leave fantasy authors like yourself or horror or sci-fi authors going, well, what about me? So is it just impossible to make money in fiction? And no, it's not. One guy I look to when building my Patreon goes by the whimsical nom de plume of Shirtaloon. His real name is like Lawrence or something, but if you browse like the Amazon top 100 in fantasy right now, he is all over the place, and he is making money hand over fist on Patreon, doing pretty much the same thing I am, whereas though he publishes web novels in serial format every month, and if you join his Patreon, then you get his chapters a month in advance. That's a selling point.
Yeah.
But then he does collect them into full volumes and like omnibuses and publish those on Amazon with some great covers I think you would appreciate, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely like there's a lot of different ways to look at this. So if you can get followers, then yeah, you can actually monetize serial fiction. And in fact, I think serial fiction can be useful in the way that you're describing, in that interest stays constant. If you're the kind of person, like if you're writing a long book, like if you're writing a trad pub like doorstopper fantasy book, it takes a long time to write that. It also takes a long time to read. So what happens is that people basically forget you exist between book 1 and book 2 if they're long books. They won't remember that they read book 1, and they won't remember what happens. So one of the newer strategies is to space those things out a little bit more, do more things that keep attention constant for your bigger books. And then, yeah, you collect them as one book. I kind of did that with Needle Ash. I did it as 3 books. And then later I put them all into one book, collected them that way. I actually published Muramasa Blood Drinkers serially initially, and then re-edited it and put it out as a full book.
Delightful.
So
yeah, you can do that. And I've actually found that Indiegogo is terrific at bringing in new readers. Like, its algorithm works way better than Amazon's. Like, you can even enter keywords just like you would for an Amazon book for your Indiegogo campaign. And I tried an experiment. I have this program called Publisher Rocket, which is supposed to generate the optimal categories and keywords for your Amazon book.
Yeah.
And it worked with Don't Give Money to People Who Hate You, and then has never worked again on Amazon.
Yeah.
But it
I
does seem to work for Indiegogo.
Yeah, I have it too.
Try it.
And like, again, it's built on this old Amazon model from like 7-8 years ago. And the guy who wrote it, I mean, it's not bad that he wrote the software, but like, it's based on an outdated model. So like, you're coming up with your ads keywords. It's like, I hear these guys like, oh, I have 20,000 ads keywords. I'm like, I don't want to do that job.
Yeah, I think John Delarose had to actually hire an assistant to do that for him.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Like,
I don't want to do that job.
yeah. Yeah, but that's what's great about Neo-patronage. Like, so going to Indiegogo for Combat Frame Exceed, which I just did on a lark, I'm like, well, I as well dip my toes in this crowdfunding thing, see if anyone bites. Maybe I'll break even. Like, got funded the first day, I think, or like the first or second day, within like 36 hours on my very first campaign, and it was bringing in new people who are still reading today, and like every campaign brings in new people. So I know it's the Twitter guru hip term, yeah, but I 10x'd my writing income by reducing reliance on KDP and adding Indiegogo because I'll let you comment, but I want you to comment on this because here's what it did. So you're familiar with like the marketing sales hockey puck graph of like you have your blockbuster, which is like short time period but big infusion of revenue right away. Then you have your long tail, which is like a steady drip income stream over the long haul. And then you kind of have like your middle market, which is between the two, right?
Yeah.
What I found is that exists in Newpub. So your Indiegogo, your Kickstarter, that's your blockbuster. That's where you can get 5 or even 6 figures for one book in like 6 weeks. Then Amazon has been reduced to the long tail. So
it's just people who buy it after the fact. So yeah, I mentioned this maybe in the YouTube comments. Someone's like, at what point is it worth it basically to print your own books? I'm like, if you know you're going to sell a lot, so you do a crowdfund, you know how many you need to print, you have the printer print them, you distribute them, or in some cases you can even hire third parties that will do all this stuff for you. Though I don't have expertise on that just yet. And then after that, what do? Well, you still put it on Amazon because there may be someone a year from now, 2 years from now that wants to buy the book, and then they could just buy it. And so that's a great option. For that as well. So I do want to address something in the chat real quick from Harvard Bentho. Thoughts on KDP's increasingly trigger-happy approach to terminating accounts. I've heard aggregators like Draft to Digital do this far less, but they take a share of the profits. Well, I'm gonna be I don't want to jump to Amazon's defense, but it's inevitable because I have to be honest. Most of the people getting terminated from KDP, most, not all. There's plenty of incorrect terminations, even in my friend circle. But most of them are people who are getting their accounts terminated because they are trying to exploit the system. And I'll give you an example that has to do with Kindle Unlimited, that I knew several people who got their accounts terminated because they thought they could game the system, and Amazon decided to crack down on it, which was you used to be able to rank up a book in a category through Kindle Unlimited reads. And so, in fact, you still can. But the way that they would do this is they would hire a firm that had a bunch of Kindle Unlimited subscriptions, would download the book and click through the pages. They had like a mouse machine that would just click through the pages one after the other. You'd get a full readout of the book, which would count as a sale. And so you do that thousands of times. Boom, it'd go to number 1 in the category. And then presumably people would buy your book at full price that weren't in Kindle Unlimited, or they would download it and read it on Kindle Unlimited. And so accounts were getting banned for that, and people were like, murr, murr, murr. It's like, okay, you admitted that you went on Fiverr and found a Chinese firm that does this, and then you got your account terminated. So you basically were trying to game the system and get people to buy your book without, trying to, Yeah, game the system. And then Amazon decided to crack down. There's many things like that. People who would put an automated link at the beginning of the book, the table of contents would be 500 pages into a giant omnibus. They put like 8 books, and then the book you downloaded would be at the end. And so it would just automate through those 500 pages and count as 500 page reads, and they get a bunch of money out of it. So then they get their account banned for that. So most of the people who are actually getting their KDP accounts banned were because they were doing basically fishy things or doing fishy things with the ads. I hate to come to Amazon's defense, but like most of the big cases where people are like, I'm an established author and this happened. It's like, yeah, you were kind of breaking the rules is why you got your account terminated. It wasn't because, you're not out here doing a bunch of political activism and that's why your account got banned. Nobody's ever heard of you on Twitter before or anywhere else because your entire career is built on gaming the Amazon system. And when that went away, you had nothing else. That's what happened. It's like you broke the rules at some point and got caught. So, yeah, Draft to Digital does it less because they don't have a system to game. How do you game the Draft to Digital system? You don't. You publish a book and then it gets distributed to all the different places. And Fiona Wolf mentions that they're redoing categories in Amazon. Yes, so they are trying to get rid of this proliferation of billions of categories where people would find a category, put their book in the category by emailing Amazon, get to a number 1 status, get an orange tag by selling 4 books, and then say that they had a bestseller and use that to sell the book. Again, gaming the system. Like, do you really have a bestseller? You sold 4 copies in a really obscure category that no one in Amazon really knows why they even created in the first place. Not quite the same as like being the number 1 fantasy book, the number 1 science fiction book. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or number 1 classic sci-fi, which me and Nick and Ardenon just got. So.
Yeah, and there's another thing about, this isn't in chat, but I want to bring it up. AI books on Amazon. People wanting to make money by not writing books. That was the inevitable next step. Is like, there's people who make money writing books. Can I make money by not writing books? And the answer is maybe, right? People are like, I'm going to take your books and I'm going to put them in an AI and then I'm going to make books and I'm going to make money. It's like, people don't buy the books because my writing is good. Believe it or not. Like, I think my writing's good, but that's not why people buy the books. People buy the books because I wrote them. Now that's a weird, what do you mean? It's like, it's because of this connection with me. They're a patron of mine. So giving an AI my books to try to duplicate my writing style. First of all, I don't write in one style. I'm kind of a chameleon. I write in several different styles. So the AI is going to go haywire if you plug all my books into it. And it's not even going to know what genre to write in. So it's going to come out with a weird book. No one's going to buy it because that's not what sells books. Right.
Right. And plus, they still haven't cracked AI for fiction yet. It can't seem to handle plot twists or conflict and will just start running around in circles chasing its own tail if you try to insert tension. So it can do nonfiction, it seems. But
yeah, most articles, if you type in a search in Google, most of the articles are written by AI and have been for some time. And once you get a sense of how humans write and how AI write, you'll click on it and be like, an AI definitely wrote this because of the way that they use keywords and the way that they order products. And it's all basically designed to funnel you into like buying a product through an Amazon affiliate page, which will make them money. And they don't write no human actually writes any of the articles.
So the guys thinking they're going to get rich by just having like large language models churn out books are in for rude awakening, because it's not going to do that. Because 1, they still can't do it reliably. 2, it still needs lots of editing, even if you want to do that. 3, you do lose that human touch. Like readers, they want a connection with the author. They want to form that bond. Yeah,
it's not just about the product itself.
I offer that. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's the same thing with AI art, right? Like, I'll use AI art to like make a thumbnail rather than pulling an image off Google search, right? Like, the AI art looks better, because it's more specific and is a little bit different looking. It's not the same as an artist making art, right? Like, I'm not commissioning artists to make thumbnails. but I would commission them to make a book cover because the artist would impress upon it their style, their touch, their desires for how things look, their imagination. All of those things are different than what an AI puts in. AIs tend to produce same face and things like that. You get it's just a different thing, right? Like AI can have its uses for certain people. When it comes to writing, by the way, Amazon does have a checkbox like, is this AI or is this not AI? Well, people can check it or not. It doesn't really, who's checking every book to see if it reads, like a human or an AI.
Well, AIs are, and they're horrible at it.
Yeah. So it's just a dumb little thing. Like people are going to flood. This is another reason why you have to look outside Amazon. Is that Amazon will get flooded with not literal garbage. Is it literal garbage? Because you can't throw it in the garbage can. Electronic garbage. It's going to be flooded with things that are just awful.
Just noise.
It's just like there's lots of noise because there's lots of books on Amazon. Then you quadruple the amount of books and 3/4 of them are unreadable. No one's gonna be using Amazon to find the books anymore at all. They will only buy something off Amazon if it's linked off of another site. And actually, I think that's been that way for me at least for like 2 years. I link to the book on Amazon from some other thing where you can buy the book here, or here's a list of all my Amazon books. Here's my author link on Amazon. It doesn't.
Yeah.
No one stumbles across it on Amazon. Now that used to happen, right? I had lots of readers who stumbled across Muramasa because they were looking for samurai fiction. But now I don't think that they would stumble across that despite it being like persistently a good seller in that category, because it just wouldn't. Like they type in samurai fiction and they get 20 different versions of Samurai Champloo DVDs, and that's what they would get.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the super chat, Sound Engraver. I appreciate it. $2 for the thumbnail. The thumbnail for this live stream is AI. I asked it to make. I wanted Johann Sebastian Bach, 80s aesthetic with sunglasses, and it made that. I was like, all right, that looks cool. We'll throw that up there.
I love the guitar. It's got like a Spanish guitar or something.
I don't know. It's like a combination of guitars that the AI came up with.
Yeah.
AI art does seem to be getting more generic. I see that too. TB88. It is getting like more generic in a way as it starts to. There's like a feedback loop where it's looking at its own outputs, and that gets a little weird. Anyway, here's some of my tiers that I might use. Kind of.
Okay, let's see them.
Based off of Brian's stuff. I have a plebeian tier. It's $1 a month, which gives you access to the Patreon feed. It's okay. Plebeians don't necessarily have a lot of money. There's the equestrian. Now you're really doing the work of the empire. They give you a free copy of Keys to Prolific Creativity, which is a $5 value. So you get the full value of the book if you haven't bought it yet. Private community, that's going to be on Discord, the Discord community. And you can buy me, I'll use that to buy more energy drinks. You can be a patrician. You notice I already have some patrons here. This is from my old Patreon.
Put a link. Do you have a? Can you throw a link?
I'll publish it.
Oh, it's not published yet. Okay.
Yeah, that's why we'll edit it and then we'll publish it now, and I'll get your feedback on it live before we.
Because I'm gonna join as soon as it's up.
Kill the stream. Okay. Yes. Where are we? So patrician. This is $15 a month. You get a free audiobook from those that are available, right? I only have a couple of audiobooks, but you can get one free one per month. And I can distribute that to you just as MP3 files, or I'll figure that out as we go. So, and then you get the Keys to Prolific Creativity book if you don't have that. Live masterclass attendance. So here's my idea is like I have these live streams. I want to do more masterclasses, which is have people on that would like feedback on their writing or their musicianship. And then other people can watch too and ask questions and comments about that as well. So we'll take a close look at your writing, and you can attend that for $15 a month and get all of that information on it. Plus the free audiobook and, the Discord community. For Senator, $35 a month. I'll send you a paperback. And you get the digital goods too. And you can show up to the masterclass. I'm thinking 1 to 2 master classes per month. Either both writing or, one writing, one music, or just there'll be whoever wants to do it. For console, you get to participate in the masterclass. That means we do your writing, or, you can play guitar for me. And then I will give you a guitar lesson and other people can watch it. So this is something that if you've never been to a music masterclass, they're really fun. I used to pay to participate in them because it was really fun. Like, you get a lesson from Pepe Romero, everybody shows up and watches, and you can watch other people get their lesson from Pepe Romero, and you just get a lot of cool information from that. You learn a lot from them. So with console, you get to actually be in the masterclass, have your stuff in the masterclass every month. So you get that feedback, plus you get to watch other people's feedback, plus you get the book. That's what I'm thinking anyway. And I'm welcome to feedback. We could change this. Tetrarch. Now you're at the level of the Caesar of the East or the West. Get one of the following: a half-hour private lesson, plus the masterclass. So, hey, you get a little extra, right? And you could pick a topic. I stole this from Brian. Pick a topic for a video or blog post. So, yeah, you have an idea for a video. You want me to address something specific or make a video about something? I will totally do that. Subject to approval. Like, I don't want to make videos on like the best fetish pornography or something, right? So it has to be something that I would actually want to make a video on, or I could actually say something on. It's like, what's your opinion on? What's your opinion on the Franco-Prussian War? I'd be like, I know it was important and I've read about it. I'm not an expert on the Franco-Prussian War. Plus all the lower tier benefits. So you get a lesson and a masterclass. That's pretty good for $100 a month. And then the Emperor level. I think my wife is texting me. Uh-oh. When you're done streaming, could you come over here with the truck, please? Also bring wasp spray.
Oh my.
She's at my mom's house.
With wasps.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah, we'll have to go shoot some wasps. So Texas has more species of wasps than any other state in the union. There's like 500 different. There's so many species of wasps, biologists haven't even classified them all.
The velvet ants.
Okay. So for Emperor, this is the last one. Yeah, you get an additional half hour of instruction. So you can get 2 lessons a month or like private editing sessions a month. And then I'll design a book cover for you if you want that, or I'll send you a signed paperback. I don't know if I want to add a third thing to that, but yeah, you could get a half hour instruction, or I will actually design a simple cover for you, a basic a Photoshop cover, not like an illustrated cover where I have to paint something. I could do that, but it wouldn't come out as good because I'm not an expert at that. Whereas overall design, I think I am an expert at. So yeah, you can get something for your use with that. I don't know. What do you think, Brian?
Okay, these all look pretty good. One piece of advice I have for you that I strongly suggest you implement is remove all references to support the artist or the word support from everywhere on your Patreon, because Patreon's own research has found that makes the artist sound needy, and it makes people think you're asking for a handout. So instead, you just want to focus on what the patron gets. So you want like words like access, early access, invite, you get, enjoy, receive, like marketing stuff. That makes sense?
Yeah. We'll do bonus content.
Bonus is great. Yeah, there you go. Now you're thinking. I was looking good. You may also want, if you haven't yet.
Then that should change all of them.
Yeah, and like I would consider putting limiting the number of patrons.
Oh yeah.
Or the ones that you give lessons on. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't have. This is another thing that one of the reasons that I stopped doing Patreon before is you set up goals, and just because there's more money attached to that goal doesn't mean I have more hours to reach that goal. Like my time is finite.
Yeah, that gets back to something I was driving at earlier. Thanks for reminding me. Was that middle section? So we have Indiegogo and Kickstarter. That is the blockbuster. We have KDP and Bina, and That's the long tail. You know where your middle market is? It's here. And almost every author is totally ignoring it and leaving money on the table. Because what Patreon and Subscribe Star are for is monetizing work you're already doing, but you're not paying yourself for.
Yeah.
So look for that stuff. Like, for example, in my case, one day I was sitting down writing and realized, hey, wait a minute, I'm not getting paid right now. Right? I get paid before the book launches in the form of the Indiegogo, but that's like to fund the creation of the book. I get paid 30 days after the book launches on Amazon with the royalties, which aren't a lot compared to the Indiegogo, but I'm not getting paid right now as I write like I would at a normal job. And that's what the Subscribe, Start, and Patreon are for, because now what I'm offering is when you sign up for mine at the Margrave tier or more, I show you what I'm working on every month. So every month you get a file with my current work in progress. So not only do you get to see what I'm editing or writing before anyone else, you get to suggest what I should do with it. You get to put your imprimatur and your mark on my projects.
Yeah, I think that's great. I missed this super chat here from Adrian. This live stream has been vindicating in my decision to post the novel I'm working on as a web novel on various sites, plus my own when I make it. Yeah, why not? You know, there's not a big disadvantage to trying out multiple avenues. The worst that can happen is no one reads it.
Yeah, and according to my boy, Pulp Archivist, web novels are just taken over. Like, if you want to know something else besides glitchy algos and large language models that are taking down KDP, it's the rise of the web novel.
Yeah, and they kind of tried to do that with Kindle Vela, and I've done a lot of experiments with it. I've done 2 years of experiments, and it just, there's no one on it. You know, it's the people were hopping on it hoping for that organic reach that they got 10 years ago on Amazon. It's not really there. If you already have a big platform and can push people into it, you can make money in it. But that's going to be true anywhere. So if you're looking to like, oh, I'll try out Vela to see if I attract people, probably not. You can always try it, but it's probably not going to work out. It hasn't worked out for me. I made a little bit of money from it, but I think they just paid me money because I put books on it, not because people were reading them by the numbers. It's like, no one's reading this, but they're giving me money for it. Okay. I'll take the money, guys.
Yeah. Don't leave it on the table. Like, too many authors are afraid to just take what's theirs, right? I don't want to sound greedy, but like, readers are like, they're putting money on the table, folks. Like, don't be scrupulous. Like, the worker deserves his wages. Find new ways, like create new income streams, create new wealth, right?
Yeah.
Because a book is wealth. It's really more like a financial instrument, like a stock or a bond that just slow drips when it's on KDP or Barnes & Noble or something, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. Hardwick Bentho, is it feasible to use free content on one's own website to build an audience to direct to a store or your books, but linking to Amazon page for each book? Yes, but how are they getting onto your website is the question. Usually that's going to be because sorry, that's pretty funny, but usually it's because you're funneling them to your website off of a social media website where you're providing other kinds of free content, engaging tweets or YouTube videos or something else.
Yeah, and I will also point out, that's fine.
Yeah. How do they get on?
That is one thing I'm also offering to my patrons is once a month, I'm doing a live Ask Me Anything Q&A on my patrons only Discord. The inaugural one is going to be tomorrow night, actually at I believe 7:30 Central Time. So if you sign up today or tomorrow if you're watching the stream, you'll be able to make it, and you can ask me all these questions, like everything the super chat is asking me and David right now. You will have my ear for an hour every month to talk about your project, ask your marketing questions, ask your editing and author craft questions. And one thing that I will give you for free, about getting people to your website is you do want to be on social media. Yes, controversy over Elon Musk aside, you do want to be on Twitter. And I can tell you how to build an audience up to 5,000 followers as an author quickly. So there is just a little nugget for you. There's your free dose of crack. Let's put it that way.
All right, Adrian, before I forget, any quick marketing tips for things like web novels or building a following from scratch in general? All the stuff Brian is talking about, he'll have advice on that. So the main thing is like you have to make and say things which bring attention to you, which you then deflect that attention into your other things like your website or your novel or whatever else you're doing. So there's a lot of different approaches to that, right? Like Twitter is all about the explosiveness of controversy. You say something big and explosive and controversial, and people pay attention to it, either in the positive or the negative, and that boosts you up. YouTube, it's hard to nail down YouTube. You can do that on YouTube. There's people who do it, but YouTube has a lot more informational reach as well. So if you're making videos on like, I'm not sure what kind of so for Adrian, for you could make videos or blog posts about media that's related to what you write. So if you're writing an isekai novel, you make content about isekai anime series and isekai light novels, and you do reviews of them, and then you link yours. And so people that are interested in that will kind of float into your sphere and catch on to that content and be interested in it and engage with it, and then they get interested in what you're doing. And you can do that as well as these other things. You can make controversial statements. Dragon Ball Z sucks. Let me tell you why. 6 reasons why it sucks. I don't actually think it sucks, but I don't know. You come up with something that will get people upset enough to share your content. That's Twitter. YouTube, it doesn't quite work that way. You have to get a little bit more into what people really want, what kind of content they really want. Gaming content about like not just like here's gameplay, but like here's my analysis of this. Here's why this game is the best in the series. That would be a great title for a YouTube video, or like I did that Diablo 4 video, the greatest game I ever played, right? Why, what's another one I did that got a lot of good views? How to pick your class for Vanilla WoW. Efficient leveling in Oblivion, right? Stuff that's informational related to games, or is a statement that's interesting about a game that people are going to be interested in. So if like JRPG fans are part of your target audience, here's why Final Fantasy VIII is actually the best Final Fantasy game. You're going to get a lot of eyes if you can make a video essay that can convincingly say that, because I couldn't.
I might take you up on that.
Yeah. So there's always like an angle to do it. And you always, like, extreme statements just get spread a lot on social media. So knowing how to harness those and then kind of deflect them into your other things, you'll kind of learn that by doing with content. And I've learned that through a lot of experimentation. One of the common comments I get is like, you hate everything, because the videos I make which are negative get 10 times the engagement as the videos which are positive, unless I make an extreme statement about something which other people think is bad. Like if I came out with a video tomorrow that said why Saint Anger is the best Metallica album, I would be able to get some views on that if I was able to do it convincingly, right? That's a positive statement about something that's negative, right? But otherwise, like, most people think I'm down on everything because they only watch the negative reviews, and YouTube just never even shows them when I'm like, this movie is great. Why this movie is great? They won't even see it.
Yeah, it's like that comic strip from the GT era. Oh, we got another one.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. I appreciate that. Since
Glory
lit
to God.
Yeah, Fiona Wolf says, since lit RPG is big, it's making a huge mark over there. But I've also seen those publishers bring over space opera, and fantasy as well. Yeah, you never quite know. It's and a lot of times the audience is interested in more than one genre. People kind of forget that. The Amazon model is like, oh well, this is a genre reader. This is like the vampire romance reader. It's like, okay, they probably read more than just vampire romance. So if you think more holistically about a person rather than like a data point, you can realize they might be interested in other things. Like if I was a woman and I wanted to start a YouTube channel, like what content would I make? Well, it depends what I'm trying to sell. If I'm trying to sell, if I'm trying to sell romance novels and I'm a woman, I could actually sell romance novels by making like makeup tutorials. That seems weird, but the people who are into romance will also be into makeup tutorials. And things like that, like beauty tips, because those readerships like the romance readership is not people who are uninterested in beauty tips. Or you could make relationship tip videos and then sell your romance novel. It sounds weird, but it actually, I think, would work because, thinking of the kind of people who are into romance, you're going to have a lot of crossover. It's not just like people who are into romance are only into romance and no other products. So, all right. What else, Brian? We're looking at your Patreon again. Mine's live. I made it live.
Okay, got the link?
Yes.
So I'm gonna join it. So while you get that, yeah. So here's your tip for funneling readers to your website and from there your books by way of Twitter. Okay, so there are different approaches depending on what level your following on Twitter is at. So if you're just starting out, what you're going to do is you're going to identify bigger accounts in the niche you're in. So like I would avoid author Twitter. I would not follow other authors. I'd try to find readers in your genre. And follow guys who are like between the 500 and 1,000 range, and reply to them like every day. Interact with a number of them, like 5 to 10 times. Make it part of your routine, and that's how you'll start getting follows from bigger accounts. Yeah. Then also tweet your own stuff, and you got to be strict with yourself. You got to do 2 to 5 tweets a day. You had something, David?
Yeah, I think that's all. That's all good. So, social media is all about people. And so a lot of authors, and I've talked about this before, like the author bots on Twitter, the land of robots, and like huge numbers of automated author bots that think that somehow being on Twitter and retweeting other author bot accounts will make books sell. It doesn't. It never has, and it probably never will. And I went in depth with a guy. He even he made a bunch of content and then he automated it so it just reposts the same content every year and doesn't actually interact with anyone. People go to social media to interact with other human beings. So you need to be a human being on Twitter or wherever else, which means you interact with people, you talk to people, you reply to people. So one of the strategies, and you'll see me and Brian do this on Twitter all the time, is like you want to quote tweeting is not a bad thing. Quote tweeting is a good thing because that brings my followers into a conversation. Like I quote tweet Brian on something. I'll quote tweet his blog post. Boom. I'm bringing more of my followers into his discussion, which they're going to then follow him. And some of his followers are going to interact with that quote tweet and follow me. And it sort of, it kind of cross-pollinates a lot. And if you can, reply to bigger accounts, quote tweet bigger accounts, not necessarily in a negative way, and you're going to kind of spread that conversation a little bit further than what you normally would. People want to, and then if somebody replies to you, reply to them, have a reaction to what they're saying. That's the way that you are going to build followers, is that you're responding to what they say. They like what you're responding to. They view you as a human being. They like that interaction. They like the information you're giving them, or just the jokes you tell. Who knows? They'll follow you.
Okay, and you have a new patron.
All right, guys. So we're starting to run out of time here. I realize we hit the 2-hour mark, so we should probably close it up here for the night. because I need to go over to my mom's house and kill wasps, apparently. So wish me luck with that.
Good luck.
And that'll be fun. So Brian's Patreon, I will link it again, and I will link the Subscribe Star, which I have here as well. And I still have a Subscribe Star. It should be in the show notes. So you can always follow me on Subscribe Star. I will enable YouTube memberships, but I'm going to keep those pretty cheap because I'm not in a position where I can add a ton of value to YouTube as it is. I might put my audiobooks like behind the paywall, and that'll probably be it. Just so like if you want to listen to an audiobook, you can pay the $5 for the audiobook and listen to all the audiobooks. Boom. It's an audiobook membership. But I don't have a ton of audiobooks or time to like record lots of them or pay someone to record them at this point. So there's not a whole lot of value add from the YouTube side. It's more like, the special chat badges and maybe audiobooks. So that'll be coming further down the line. All right. Anything else, Brian, before we...
Well, I was kind of wanting to save the best for last here. Okay. Did you get that thing I sent you, that cover in the Discord?
Oh, no. Let me look. I must have missed it. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I want to make the YouTube debut of my next book's cover right here.
All right. Let me see how... I'll just show it on the screen over here. Here it is. The Burned Book. This is a good cover.
Yeah, that's just like the sketch. That's not the final one.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, let's talk about the cover design because I think it's actually pretty good.
I would love to hear you talk about.
You have notice that we have really one dominant color, which is gray. Gray is a color. Gray is not a non-color. It's a neutral color in the presence of other colors. But if your whole thing is gray, like if I get out City of Silver, do I have it here? Hey, I have Matt Krotz's book here though. You guys follow Matt Krotz on Twitter. He's a great guy. Here's Kyrie. You guys should totally buy that. Anyway, so if gray's by itself, it is a color. We have one contrast color, which is red. My cover for City of Silver, which is everybody's favorite cover, is just a Photoshop of stock photos, and it's all gray. But gray has a certain mood to it, which is like gritty, dark, futuristic, realistic, right? Stuff like that. In this case, we see swords, so that kind of plays into a genre. We're looking at probably fantasy. We have a humanizing element on the front, which is really good. We like to have people on covers. People like to see people on covers, not just objects and concepts, right? And then we have a scene that looks like there's been a battle. So this looks like, man, I'm going to get some war. I'm going to get some conflict. I'm going to get some battle. It definitely looks like a cover that I would want to read, especially because I love fantasy and I love military fantasy. This is the kind of thing that I like to see. I have a book called Needle Ash that has the same sort of format but with different colors. It has green and yellow instead of gray. Which one would I think is grittier? Well, this one is because it's gray, whereas the green and yellow looks more like high fantasy. Just those green goes with high fantasy. I don't know why, it just does. Maybe forests, because there's forests. We think of green. But yeah, I think it's good.
It's a relief you cited those elements because you nailed the mood, tone, and genre. Yes, because those of you who are familiar with my award-winning Soul Cycle know that it's pretty much like space pirates. It's kind of Final Fantasy-style magic tech. Well, I'm now finally going back and filling in the untold backstory. So we're going way back thousands of years. So the Burned Book, Arkwright Cycle, Book 1 of the Soul Cycle prequel series is gritty, grimy, blood and guts, military fantasy.
I love it. So yeah, if you guys want to read my military fantasy book, it's called Needle Ash. I'll actually link it.
Yeah. Do it. Read Needle Ash. And to get the very first look at the Burned Book, because I've got the early outline, at least the first half of it, because I only had a half month to work on it because I launched my Patreon in the middle of the month. But my patrons right now are at the Margrave tier and up are getting access to the first half of the Burned Book outline, and they will receive additional monthly doses of the book as I complete it. So you get to see it in real time. That's what you got to look forward to
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
join my Patreon. Yeah, Patreon, subscribe star.
There's
Let's look
another
at Needle Ash.
there's
Go ahead.
another thing I like too, which is like I like things which are kind of broad in time. I actually do that with my fantasy series. So if you read City of Silver and the Moonsong books, those take place in the far future from the from Needle Ash and Water of Awakening in my upcoming book, which hopefully will get out later this year, maybe December, called King Leper. Which will be the third book of that series. And then I have one that's even earlier called Bright Children that's actually only on Vela, which I'll pull off of Vela. I guess at some point here it'll come off of Vela. But if you want to read it on Vela, there it is. It's called The Bright Children, and that takes place in the mythic past, like mythological level past. You know, thinking like if we're thinking past, I love the idea of like distant past, like Silmarillion versus Lord of the Rings. That I don't know. There's a great feeling to that, like kind of looking at ancient history in a fictional universe that I find very appealing, which is why I do it. And I like to read that kind of stuff too. So anyway, keep a lookout for that. Is there anything else, Brian, before we head out?
Yeah, can't believe I forgot. Got to give a shout out to my Soul Cycle awesome cover artist Marcelo Ursi Blanco, who is returning to do the Arkwright Cycle series. Awesome guy to work with. And yeah, just one final call to action here. To get direct access to me, to get free books, to get pro opinions on your book, both at my monthly AMA and daily on my patrons only Discord, and to get a chance to have your feedback directly impact my work, join my Patreon or Subscribe Star right now. Links are under the video. And David, thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you all next time. I don't think I'll have any like parting music today, so I apologize for that. You know, in future streams, I'll try to play some music, but we have a guest today, so I'm not gonna bother with that. And I got to go kill some wasps right now, so we don't have time for like a 20-minute long trip through space in some space ambient. But I'll do space ambient next time, or maybe on Saturday. So we'll see you then. Thanks for joining me, Brian. You can check out his Patreon and Subscribe Star and his books, including the upcoming book, The Burned Book, from the Arkwright Cycle, first book in the series, in a new prequel, distant prequel series. I like that. Knights of the Old Republic level prequel series.
Yeah, exactly.
Have a great one, guys, and I'll see you all next time.
I guess.